Is there any sample lab environment where we can use these routers and?
Okay. So the next topic is Ansible. Right? Before we jump into the technical aspects, we'll see how it can be used for network automation. Right? If you see what we have done in the last class, we used Python. Now we are saying we'll be using Ansible for network automation. So it might be a little confusing, like, okay, what is, why we need, when we already have Python using which we could do this, why we need another tool which can do the same thing or similar things, right? The answer to that question is yes. While Python can do some of these tasks, Python has a steep learning curve, which means people need to have the programming kind of aptitude to learn coding and then be able to write scripts to achieve these things, right? For example, the example which we have taken of configuring, let's say, loopback adapter is a simple one but significant one, right? Like if by automating this through a script, we can configure these loopback adapters in one shot on any number of devices which are sitting across the globe, right? You don't need to keep doing SSH into each device. We can just have one script and trigger that script. It will go and create, configure these things, loopback adapters, VLANs, etc., on interfaces on any of the devices which we want. Okay, but to make it generic, right? For example, let's say there are conditions on this region. Let's say your data center is spread across the globe. In one region, you want to use one set of loopback interfaces, one set of VLANs. The VLAN numbers are going to be different. The host names will follow certain pattern. All such requirements will be there. Now, if you see the Amazon AWS instances, they start like US East 2 hyphen something like that. They start, right? So let's say you have this kind of requirements. Now, automating this will be in Python. It is going to be simple because these are all strings. Ultimately, these are all strings. They have certain pattern. Using our strings knowledge of working with strings using Python, we can take the basic data from a file, from an Excel file or a CSV file, and then prepare the data in the way we want for this region, let's say. For the other region, let's say the name has to start with like US West or Europe, APAC, etc., etc. Accordingly, we can formulate the data and feed the data to the script. The script will just take, right? In our script, in the sample code that we have written, I've hard-coded these things. Hard-coded meaning, I put these names here. I put this IP address here. I put the username here, password here, loopback IP address here, mask here. This is known as hard coding. Within the script, I have put the data, which means I run the script 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. It will do the same thing on the same device. It will connect to the same device, configure the same loopback adapter with the same IP and mask, which is not what we want, right? It should be more generic. So what is the ideal way I would have done is I'll create a file, data.file. I will push my data into this loopback IPs for US East. This will be a list, right? Let's say. And so on. Like this, I will push my data. I will free my script from the data and push it into a different file. And then instead of using it here, I will get it from here. I will get it from this file. I'll import this. So this data will be available for me. And then I'll start using. So it will be like two packet IPs for US West of 0. Okay. So I'm not hard coding. So tomorrow, if I have to change this data, I don't have to touch my script. Okay. So like this, by using Python, you have flexibility to come up with your own logic, complex logic, to do the way things you want, to make it generic if it needs, and so on. Okay. So to work with Python, we need a steep learning curve. A person should learn programming and be able to write scripts, which are like generic, which do not have this kind of hard codings, which will work with multiple devices. So on. But let's say someone doesn't have that that programmatic kind of aptitude, but still they have to achieve network automation. For such people, we can use Ansible. Right? So these are two tools which are given for us to make our life easier by automating certain tasks. Now each tool has different capabilities. Python is it's like giving you nuts and bolts, and giving you parts and nuts and bolts. You can arrange the parts using nuts and bolts in a way you want. Whereas Ansible is like giving you predefined shapes. With those predefined shapes, the kind of things that you can build is limited. Okay, it is like that. Python is more flexible, whereas Ansible is kind of rigid. Not rigid. What you can do with Ansible have already been predefined, right? You can only do those things. Of course, you can always extend the capabilities of Ansible by writing your own modules and so on. But which anyway, if you have that kind of programmatic aptitude to be able to code your own things in Ansible, you would as well use Python, right? So that is the thing. Coming back to Ansible. Right? Ansible is also based on Python. Ansible does not require you to write code, which means you will not be writing writing logic. Ansible has predefined things known as modules. So all that you need to do is figure out which module to use to achieve what. So first you'll start with the problem, what I want to achieve. Okay, in network automation problem, this is what I want to do. I want to connect to these many devices, and then I want to be able to configure certain network things on the devices. Then all that you need to do is, okay, check which particular module of Ansible you can use that, and give instructions. Okay, connect to this device, do this. So that's why we call this as a configuration management tool. We'll use this tool to configure either network devices or Linux hosts. Ansible scripts are known as playbooks, right? We don't call them as programs or scripts. We call them as playbooks because it gives us a flexibility to define what you want to do in the form of a play, which involves certain tasks, right? Playbook contains plays. Plays are nothing but a collection of tasks, what you want to achieve. Playbook contains plays, which are nothing but collection of tasks, which need to be performed as part of configuration management. Right? Now, this configuration management can be on Linux devices. Let's say the Linux administrator, he wants to create certain users. He wants to assign those users to certain groups. He wants to create home directories for those users, make some stuff available to them via shared folders. All this could be the tasks. On the network devices, The network administrator's task could be creating VLANs so that you segregate your organization's network into virtual networks and then provide a secure way for different people to isolate them to different VLANs and so on. And so those are the tasks which you want. Those could be classified as configuration management tasks. Any questions? So what you have is a number of managed nodes, and there are some nodes which you are trying to manage. These are nothing but your could be Linux devices, Linux servers, or network devices. But there should be a machine where Ansible is installed, which knows where the playbooks are being written, and from there the entire control will happen. Right? So that we call it as control node, and the other machines we call them as managed nodes. Hope this difference is clear. What is Python? What is Ansible? What Python can do? What Ansible can do? When we use Python, when we use Ansible. Akhil, Ramesh. Okay. Of course, it is at a very high level. Okay, just some definitions. Control node is where Ansible is installed, and managed nodes are the systems on which we want to perform tasks. The way it works is, it works in a push-based model. Tasks will be defined on the control node. This control node pushes these tasks to the devices which are being managed. The opposite of it is pull-based, where agents pull the tasks, agents take the initiative, they pull the tasks from the control node and then they execute. Right? Ansible works using push-based model. And another characteristic of Ansible is it is agentless. Right now we are saying, yeah, there is a control node, there are some managed nodes. The control node goes and does some tasks on this on the remote nodes. Typically, wherever this kind of situation is involved, where someone has to carry out some tasks remotely, people go for something known as agents. So there is some software or some utility which will be installing on the managed nodes, which will carry out tasks on our behalf, on the behalf of the control node. And after the configuration is over, we'll uninstall those agents. Okay? Ansible doesn't work that way. Ansible is agentless, which means you do not have to install anything whatsoever on the devices which are being managed. All that it requires is those devices, if they are Linux servers, they should have Python installed. Because Ansible is based on Python, the tasks that we write in the form of playbooks ultimately will be converted into Python code. It goes and executes on the remote devices. And yeah, now the remote devices, if they are Linux servers, and Python will be installed on them, so Ansible will be able to connect to them, execute these Python scripts. But what about network devices? Network devices may or may not have Python installed on them. Nowadays, most of the Cisco devices are coming up with Python preloaded on them, but it's still not like full-fledged. Right? It is just bare bones Python that will be installed on them. So in such cases, what happens? How Ansible will work? Ansible uses plain SSH connection. It will execute the Ansible playbook locally, which means on the control node, and sees what is the task that we are trying to achieve. It goes and uses the SSH shell commands and executes the task on the managed nodes. So this way, Ansible is able to perfectly balance different types of agents. Agents which have everything pre-installed, agents which have certain restrictions, like network devices. Control node is the machine. It should basically be a Linux machine because Ansible can be installed only on Linux. We cannot use Windows machine as a control node. We can use multiple nodes for resiliency. Like if you have one control node which has to carry out tasks on hundreds of devices, then the control node undergoes certain performance issues. So to take care of this, we can have multiple control nodes. Managed nodes are the devices which are being managed by the control node. These can be Linux servers or network devices. We do not need Ansible to be installed on managed nodes. Right? We don't need any agent to be present on them. We don't even need Ansible to be present on them. All we need is SSH connectivity. If they are Linux servers, Python should be there. If they are network devices, then that restriction is not there. We'll use a different way to carry out things on the network devices. There's a schematic diagram. You have control nodes, control node connecting to a bunch of managed nodes. This is the set of instructions to be carried out, written in a playbook in a format known as YAML. YAML. I think we learned how YAML documents look and how to process them using Python, right? In the file IO module of Python. So your Ansible playbooks will be written in YAML language. Now it also needs another information. For example, like let's say I have 3 nodes to connect to. So the details of those 3 nodes should be defined in my inventory. I'll have some inventory. Whatever you put in my inventory, I will go and perform the task on all the machines within the inventory. That is the meaning of inventory. Inventory is nothing but collection of the managed nodes on which you want to carry out these instructions. Okay. Any doubts here? You have a Linux machine which controls things. It has a file called as inventory where the list of all the managed nodes is mentioned. It has another file known as playbook where the actual activity to be done, performed is mentioned. For example, configuring VLANs. Then it takes this inventory, goes on connecting to each machine, carries out these instructions, and then it finishes the task. Okay. So now there's a distinction. How do you deal with Linux servers? How do you deal with network devices? This is how we deal with Linux servers. Ansible uses SSH to connect to the server. The servers, which means the Linux machines or the managed nodes, do not need to have Ansible installed, but they should have Python installed because some Python code will be copied onto these servers, which are managed nodes, and it will be executed there. And it returns the status of the task to the managed node. Vis-a-vis how it works on network devices is Python code runs locally on the control node. Right? Whatever Python code that needs to be done, it runs locally. and only the tasks which need to be carried out in the form of commands will be sent over SSH to the network device, and those commands are executed and the task is done. How do we install Ansible? It's quite simple. There are you can use any of the package managers like apt in case of Ubuntu, RPM in case of Red Hat Linux, DNF, or any of the package managers can be used to install. Or we can also use Python's package manager known as pip to install. So this is suggested for beginners using using apt or DNF. And you can simply say sudo apt Ansible. For a little more advanced users, installing using pip is more recommended because it gives more control on how do you handle things internally. Okay. So if you have those your VMs ready, you can do it along with me. I'll paste the commands here in the chat room. Right? Why we are using sudo is, anyone? Why do we use sudo?
To run administrative commands.
Yeah. Because these installation tasks are supposed to be performed by administrators. So in case you have not logged in, you have logged into this system server as a normal user, you will not be able to perform those admin tasks. So you will have to escalate your privileges. So sudo stands for super user 2. 2 as a super user. Super user is nothing but root. Now this is equivalent to in Windows when we try to copy some things into system folders or somewhere. It says you do not have, you need admin rights for this. And it, or you can open a command prompt in normal mode as well as admin mode. PowerShell in normal mode and admin mode, where admin mode has enhanced privileges. So it is that. The first thing is how Ubuntu works is whenever it comes as a bare bone OS, right, with the bare minimum things which are required for OS to function properly. After that, anything that you want to install is available as packages, right? On demand, whenever we want them, we can go get them and then install them. Now you have onboard package manager tools apt, which can be used to apt or snap, or there are a few more which are supported. They keep changing, right? Snap is a better version of better compared to apt, but apt still works. And they keep enhancing, better versions keep getting released. So this guy apt knows where is your where to get it from. See, you see here you are simply saying sudo apt install Ansible. How does it know where is this Ansible available? How does it know where on internet to go and fetch this Ansible, download it, and then install it on your system? All that is fed into the apt program. Apt knows where is your remote repository. But the repository, it also maintains a local repository, which means it's like a catalog. I think we discussed this already, right? These repositories are like catalogs or menus. Okay, when you go to a hotel, he'll give you a menu and say, yeah, this is what is available. Right? You order from that. Suppose you say you order something which is not available. You go to a dosa hotel and say you want to have pizza. Right? He says, sorry sir, I do not have pizza. This is my menu. Whatever is in the menu, that is what you can order. And then later he realizes, oh, okay, there's a demand for pizza. So he will update. He'll add that item to one of the things that he serves, and he'll update his menu card. So there is now pizza available on his menu. You can order it. In the same way, app has a local copy of the repository where it knows what are all available and where they are available. Now, in that local copy, this Ansible may not be available. Means it may not be known where Ansible is located. So first we need to add first we need to tell where Ansible is available, where it can be downloaded from. That is what the first statement is doing. Sudo apt add repository ppa ansible/ansible. Right? This is a standard location where this package is available. Again, app knows where to connect the remote repository. Within the remote repository, this is the structure where it is available. And then we say, we added the repository, we are updating our menu. We added that pizza to our things that we can serve, and we updated our menu. We say sudo apt update. After that, we'll be able to issue this command. Now, app knows where Ansible can be fetched from and installed. Once it is installed, we can check whether it is properly installed or not using this command, Ansible ---- version. If you get anything like this, like depending on the version that you have installed, this could vary. But if you see this kind of command, you're good. It's been properly installed. Instead, if it says Ansible is not a command that I know of, probably there's something that has gone wrong. Okay, so if your VM's ready, please install and let me know if you are facing an issue. Okay. So you have installed a new tool. The first thing that you need to do is configure the tool, which means give it some information, configuration information, which can be used by that tool to function properly. Right? So it requires a lot of details, like how do I connect to remote devices? Where are my modules located? If I download new modules, where are they going to come and sit? If the user is writing any user-defined modules, modules are nothing but actual tasks, the Python code related to the task that we want to achieve using Ansible. Right? All this information needs to be configured. For most of the settings, as they do with any other software, they are provided default values. In case we want to change, we can change it. Right? If you want to change the configuration, we'll be putting the changed configuration in a file with this name, ansible.cfg, stands for configuration. Okay. So if you are putting your configuration in a file, Ansible should know where to find that file, right? So there are certain standard places where Ansible looks for this file. The first place is it will try to look for this environment variable. In the environment variables, it will try to look for Ansible underscore config. If this environment variable is set to some path, then your Ansible.cfg will be picked up from that location. Okay? This environment variable will be given highest priority. If there is a path where your Ansible.cfg is residing is provided, it will be taken, it will be considered. Suppose if this is not there, suppose this environment variable is not set, the second place where it looks for this config file is the current directory, from wherever you are currently executing Ansible commands. Then, like this, it goes in the order. Then the next place it looks is logged in users home directory. The last place it looks is etc Ansible directory. Okay. Now, any questions like what is configuration file? Why do we need it? Where to keep it? So those are the facts that we are discussing now. Every tool will have some configuration information, right? Which will help it to function properly. Same way, Ansible also has this information. That's what we are currently talking about. Now, if you are saying, I'll put my configuration data into a file, where will that file be available? Where will Ansible look for that file? That is what we are defining in this slide. First, if this location is set in Ansible underscore config, it will look for this environment variable, see what is the path that has been stored in this, go to that path and look for Ansible.cfg. If it is not found, look in the current directory. If it is not found, look in the user's home directory. If it is not found there as well, go to etc Ansible directory and check for the presence of this file. If it is not there as well, throw an error saying, I do not know where is the config file. Look at it. Now, while that can be done, Ansible has a recommendation for us. They recommend keeping Ansible.cfg in the current project where you're where you are writing your rest of the stuff. Okay. So you'll create a directory. Inside that you'll start writing your Ansible playbooks, right? So keep your Ansible CFG there itself. How this will be useful is you can do task-wise configuration settings. If the configuration settings have to be different for different tasks, that control is there with you. Now, with this possibility of Ansible.config lying anywhere, right? Because it can be, we don't know where Ansible is reading it from, right? So what they have done is when you check this version command using Ansible-F version, they also show which configuration, which Ansible.cfg is currently being used, so that we know that is the right file. And if we want to make any changes to the settings, that is where we need to make. Let me show you. So see, currently it says it is none, which means it is not able to find the config file in any of the options that are mentioned. Neither the environment variable is set, nor it is present in the current directory. Current directory is this. If I do ls, there is no ansible.cfg. Right? Like this, it went on checking in each location. It is not able to find anywhere. ls/sc ansible. There is no ansible directory at all. Sorry. Using this command. Okay. So since it did not find in any of those places, it is saying there is no configuration file as of now. So we can, if you start creating folders to put all your work in that, you can create a ansible.cfg there and mention. I mean, ansible.cfg by default it has some settings. Ansible has some settings. If you want to change any of the default settings, only then you will be needing user-defined ansible.cfg. You can override the default values by specifying your own values inside this ansible.cfg. Okay. A typical configuration file would look like this. Inventory is equal to the file where the inventory is mentioned. What is inventory? Let's someone to recall what is inventory.
List of devices that we can connect to.
Yeah. So list of devices that we can connect to. So that is one of the basic information which Ansible needs, right? So that's what we are specifying in ansible.cfg. And then now when you go and connect to a remote user, as which user you should go and connect. That is mentioned in remote user. Now when you go and try to connect to that user, is this connectivity enabled via SSH with passwordless key-based mechanism, SSH keys-based mechanism, or should it ask for password? The default setting is every time it asks for passwords. Suppose you have established this connectivity via SSH keys, passwordless authentication. So you need to explicitly set ask pass to false, which means do not ask password when I'm trying to connect as this user to the machines which are mentioned in my inventory, because I have made my own arrangements. Okay. And the second set of config settings that we can mention are privilege escalation mode, which means, let's say you want to what you'll be doing with Ansible is most of the times you'll be changing the configuration, right? You'll be installing some packages, writing something to, let's say, some environment variables, setting some environment variables, or fetching some data, configuring network devices. These are all kind of admin tasks, correct? So when you go through Ansible also, these tasks should be carried out as a admin user with privileged, escalated privileges. So the privilege escalation details we'll be defining it here. First of all, is privilege escalation required at all? Is decided by setting become to true. Right? Become means you become the admin user. Second thing is become method. What is the method to be used to change to admin user? Here we are saying sudo, sudo. The next thing is, yeah, I'm ready to escalate my privileges, but to which user should I escalate my privileges? By default, it will be root, right? But here we are explicitly mentioning it as root. Now, if I'm doing that, should I be prompted with password? If I'm escalating my privileges to root, do I need to enter password or not? Or have you mentioned it in sudo as file that yes, this so-and-so user can escalate his privileges to root user without requiring password? If that is done, we don't need to We don't need Ansible to keep prompting for the password, right? So we can set this become ask pass to false. These are just sample settings that I'm showing. Right? There are a lot of other settings that we can change. The significance of each of these entries I have explained, like whatever I have explained, same thing has been mentioned. Okay. Once you define the configuration, the second file it needs is inventory. Right? That is the list of devices that we can manage. Now, again, this file can be located in multiple locations. The default location is etc ansible host. If it is not there, it will try to look for in the current folder. Right? If it is not there in the current folder or in the default folder, it will throw an error. So instead of this, what we do is in the configuration file, we specify where is your inventory file located. So that takes away your headache, right? It doesn't matter where you want to keep your inventory file. You keep it wherever you want. Just mention its path in the your config file by using this property called as inventory. Inventory is equal to path to your inventory file. A simplest inventory is defined like this, right? A bunch of host names with domain names or IP addresses. This is fine. This is how a simple inventory looks like. You just create a file called as inventory or host. You can keep an extension. You don't have to keep an extension. Typically, we don't keep an extension because there is not a specifically any predefined format. It's just random strings being pasted into this file. So we create this without any extension normally. And typically, we either call it as host or inventory so that it makes sense. Right? Logically, we are storing the inventory values in it. So it makes sense to call this file inventory or hosts or managed nodes. I can call anything. You see here I have some web servers, some database servers, and some machine. I don't know what it is. Right? So all these things are lying. While Ansible can make use of these devices, these details to go and connect to them, as a user, as a admin, you are not very happy because everything is like dumped here. Suppose, let's say, on web servers, you want to perform one set of configuration tasks. On database servers, you want to perform a different set of configuration tasks. On assume that this is a network device. On this network device, there's a third set of administration tasks that you want to, or configuration task changes that you want to make. Right? So it makes sense to split your inventory into groups. Right? This is one way to define inventory. A better way would be assign a group name to the inventory entries. So you see web 1, web 2, this IP address, these are all my web services. So I created a group called as web services and put it here. In our case, networking case, what we can do is probably I'll have to replace this. This is how my inventory looks like. This is how my config file looks. Here I don't need any other things because I'm going with all the defaults. Right? Use the default root user, default mechanism to ask for passwords or not. So I've just specified my inventory. Inventory is equal to inventory, which means within the same directory, I should have a file with this name, called as inventory. So to avoid confusion, I will make this as hosts, and I'll rename my host file. Hosts. So you see, this config file is project specific config file, and inside this I have specified the location of my inventory file. So using this information, it reaches this guy. It reaches this file and then sees a bunch of devices being defined. Now they have a very generic group which is associated called as devices. If I want, I can refine this. I can refine my grouping mechanism. So what I'll do is, instead of calling them all as devices, I'll call this R1 and R2 as routers. Then S1 and S2 are switches. Right? Then my devices group will have two children. Okay, I can stop with this itself. I have put some. Okay, what are these Ansible hosts, etc., etc. We'll come to that in a minute, but just focus on these names for now. I have a host named as R1, host name as R2, device name as S1, device name as S2. What are these? We have seen the EV topology, right? These four devices, R1, R2, S1, S2. So I put their details in my inventory file. Where is it? Yeah. R1, R2, S1, S2. Now, the kind of configuration that I want to do on routers vis-a-vis the switches could be different, right? Slightly different. The configuration commands which I want to issue to routers will be different versus the configuration commands that I want to issue to this thing. So in such cases, this grouping helps. Now instead of specifying, okay, take R1, go and do the config, do this config. Take R2, go and do this config. Instead of telling like that, I can simply say, go and apply this config to all the devices which are present in this group. Go and do the router configuration steps to all the routers. Go and apply switch configuration step to all the switches within this group. Now let's say there is a firewall policies or something which needs to be applied across all the devices. So what you'll say, you'll simply say, go and apply these rules, common rules, for all the devices. What does all these devices consist of? It consists of two children, which are nothing but routers and switches. So devices have two children, routers and switches. It will take this, go to routers. Within the routers, you have R1, R2. Within switches, you have S1, S2. It will go and connect to all these devices and carry out the configuration tasks. Okay, this just shows different ways you can group, right? By type is divided by type. These are all web services. These are all database servers. The second classification shows data center wise. Now, each data center has this web server, this database server. West data center has this database server, this web server. You see some of these entries are repeated. right? web2.example.com is coming here also. web2.example.com is coming here also. That is okay, right? I can specify a host any number of times because I'm putting it in different. If I'm grouping it differently. Here I grouped in it's by its type called as web servers. Whereas here I'm creating a group data center wise because this is East data center, this is West data center. So let's say I want to take a planned shutdown of East data center. So I can remotely shut down all these devices by saying, yeah, connect to East data, all the devices in the East data center, bring them down, bring them up, go to West data center, bring them down, do the configuration task, bring them up, like that. Right? Suppose some of these devices are or web servers are production web servers on which production application will be deployed. And there you might have some rules or policies that you need to set. So you can have another group for all the production devices. If you want to perform some tasks, you can ask Ansible to do it. And the grouping is, let's say this guy alone here becomes is part of the development group, so that the policies which you apply for development machines will be different. Here with inventory grouping, this is very, very important because this will help us save a lot of time if you properly group. Of course, again, you don't have to worry in the beginning itself. How do I know which all groups to create? How will I know which host to configure under which groups? And you don't have to really remember that. Start with the basic inventory. As and when there is a need arises, go on refining it further. Okay. Suppose you see some group information is lacking, and now what will happen? Let's say, suppose this group was not there, and Web1, DB1 are part of this data center. I want to bring them down by connecting to them. So DB1 is defined here, Web1 is defined here. Right? I'll have to give two commands. For this DB1, do this. For this Web1, do this. Instead, if you define this group, we'll simply say, yes, go to this data center, whatever devices which are inside, shut them down for a planned maintenance. Something like that. Okay, we'll get started off. Then the name could be confusing. I'll rename it as Ansible_work. Right? So that I'm not creating any system folder or internal folder. I'm just creating a normal folder to place my task here. Right? In this, we initially said, right, recommended way is keep Ansible.cfg independent. Right? For each project, you create its own Ansible.cfg. Right? So we'll go here, right click, new file, Ansible.cfg. Now this name should be the same. Right? You cannot my Ansible.cfg or something like that. And you can do that provided you mention it, saying what is the name of your what's the name of your configuration file. Okay. So to avoid that headache, we can simply keep it as Ansible.cfg, which will just have one section. What is the this we call it as defaults. Right? By default, what are the things that you'll be putting in? This has nothing to do with the inventory group in that we saw. Right? Or you can, if you skip this also, no problem. We'll simply specify what is your inventory. My inventory is going to be hosts. Right? No other path within the same directory. So now I need to create this host file. Right? In this host, I will specify r1.cisco.com because this is my, let's say, my fully qualified FQDN, fully qualified domain name. But then, unless you have this name resolution in place, right, I'll not be able to, I may or may not be able to ping to this. Right? Let me, if I can ping. Oh, this is on my local. So from my local terminal. This is not terminal. Okay. It says I cannot ping because the hostname resolution does not happen. Instead, I can say 19. Is the device up? Yes, the device is up. Excellent. Sorry, not this. It is pinging my IP address. Okay. So if you want to do this, we have to make this mapping between hostname and IP address in a file known as host file. It will be there. There's a file known as host file under etc hosts in Linux or under system32 drivers, etc hosts. In this file, we have to make entries. Something like this. It is my R1. Okay. Save file because I need to come back as admin to be able to save it. Now I'll be able to ping R1 because the name R1 has been associated with this. Okay. Now once I do this, I'll be able to put R1 in my host. So suppose my host file does not contain these entries, it doesn't understand R1. So here I'll have to specify IP address. Okay. Why we are doing and what we are doing? We are creating our host file. What is host file? The list of devices which will be managed by Ansible. Okay. So first device is, let's say R1. Right? As of now, only R1 is up. So let's put others also R2, S1, S2. So this is my, assuming that I have made entries for these as well. But I have not started the other devices. They will not be. This is started and this is ping. So now, once I make this entry, I can either ping using the host name or IP address. Where was I? Yeah. Okay. We created our Ansible.cfg. We created our host file. Now, if you want to check if things are fine, where am I? I'm not in the folder. That's why it is given none. CD Ansible. Sorry, CD Ansible underscore work. Okay, I should specify defaults. So we need to specify the section headers. This section is defaults, this section is privileged escalation, and so on. So now it is saying this is the version of my Ansible, this is the location of my config file. Where is it? Home, expert, work, Ansible work, Ansible CLG. Okay. These things you can ignore for now. So now if I give any Ansible command here, it knows where to find config command, config file. It goes to the config file. It knows what is its host file. It goes to host file and says, oh, okay, these are the devices that I need to work with. So that is how this resolution will happen. This path will be traced. Any questions? So we have defined the host. Suppose we have not made those host entries, etc host file entries. Then if I simply put R1, Ansible will not know what is R1, right? So we need to tell what is the IP address. Okay, R1 is the friendly name, the host name that you want to use. But what is the actual host IP address which is associated with this? That you specify using Ansible underscore host property. For R1, Ansible underscore host is this. And R1's network OS is iOS. For S1, Ansible host is this IP address. Ansible network OS is iOS. Now, why this is need? Network OS is, as we discussed, right? Ansible has a lot of modules for each of the network device types. So by looking at this network OS, it knows how to deal with these things, which module to on. Okay. Now, once we have defined this, using Ansible, we can verify whether our inventory has been properly defined or not. That would be the first thing, because we created a series of files. We created ansible.cfg. We created hosts. Inside that, we put some data. We are not sure whether our Ansible is able to read all this information. That we can check by doing a simple check known as Ansible inventory, Ansible hyphen inventory. So there's a utility which is created, Ansible hyphen inventory. To this, we are giving a command minus list. So whatever is there in the inventory, list it in this format and show. There's another command. Have I mentioned it? If I have not mentioned, I'll show you. So it is able to identify your hosts and it is able to show those names. So we are good here. Another way to list your, so you see it is showing some metadata. Are there any variables? No variables. Then it is showing by default there will be two groups, all and ungrouped. By default, all the devices will be placed in these two groups. Right? All are ungrouped. Now, if you look at our host file, this is our host file. We have not assigned any group to them, so they will become ungrouped. That's why they are being listed under ungrouped. Another way to check list of Ansible hosts is Ansible minus list hyphen hosts. Ansible I'll just show that. Ansible uses variables to store data. Yeah. Okay. So we'll remove them from the host. So as we have shown, right, we can tell what is the IP address associated with this using this Ansible underscore host. Now these are known as variables because here I put 150. Here the same name will be there, data will be different. And so the data which we store in these will keep varying, but their significance will remain the same. And this is used to store IP address of device. This variable is used to store the type, the OS type of this network device, and so on. Now, using these variables, we are defining at the host level, right? So we call them as host variables. Sorry for that. Right. Now you see in this host variables, if you closely look at this host variables, right? This is common. Ansible Network OS is iOS for this R1 also, iOS for this R2 also. In fact, for S1, S2 are also Cisco iOS device switches. So for them also, Network OS is going to be iOS, right? So if I define for these also these properties like this, it will be like kind of I'm duplicating this data 4 times, correct? Ansible host I cannot help because that is unique. IP address will be unique to each machine, so that I have to mention as a host variable next to each host. But these kind of things, for example, iOS will be common for all Cisco iOS devices. Such thing, is there something that we can do to make it better? As we discussed, groups comes to our rescue, right? Define, split them into groups. Now these are R1 and R2 are routers. This one is S2R switches. Now suppose my switches OS type is different and routers OS type is different. So I can define for routers. I'll say, sorry. For routers, you define wheres. Define router wheres variables for routers. What will be that variable? This guy. What will be its value? This. Right now I can remove this. Because this Ansible Network OS is equal to IOS, this property will be applied to all the routers, which means all the devices which are grouped under router. Okay, this is a better way, efficient way of doing this. Any questions so far? I know we are still putting the dots. We need to just connecting the dots in a minute. And we created a Ansible this thing. Config file. We created a host file. Now you want to ping and check all the routers, whether the routers are up, right? Instead of saying Ansible ping, Ansible M1 ping, Ansible M2 ping, Ansible do that, Ansible do this, I can simply say Ansible all routers. Take Ansible, go to this group, issue this command, right? -m stands for module. So in Ansible, there's a module known as ping. This is not ICMP ping, the normal ping which we do on command prompt. This is not that ping. This is a Ansible module called as ping. And so to specify this Ansible module ping, we give the -m. And suppose you want to check ping your devices and see. What you'll do, you go to your command prompt, Ansible, the other command which I wanted to show you, the list host, right? Let us say Ansible all. Then minus list host. Ansible inventory works differently. If I say Ansible inventory, it knows, it just needs to fetch Ansible inventory. So I can say minus list, fetch the inventory and list it. But Ansible is a generic command. Ansible is a very generic command. So we have to tell for which device, for which group, for which set of groups this command needs to be applied. So I'm saying do this for all devices, whatever is there in the host. And how all is defined, how all is understood, because we saw by default in inventory there are two groups known as all or ungrouped. And if there is no grouping defined, all the devices that you are defining will go into ungrouped. And that ungrouped is a child of all. So I'll say Ansible all minus list hyphen hosts. It is saying there are 4 hosts, R1, R2, S1, S2. Now it won't show all that grouping information. It's simply because we are saying directly pick them up from all group. It will just pick and show. Okay. Now I want to ping only R1 because only my R1 is up. R2, R3, R2, S1, S2 are down anyway. Right? I'll say Ansible on which device to act on, R1. What action to be done? Ping. This is not a normal ping, so we should say this is a module -m ping. Okay. These are network devices, so we need to deal with them differently. Okay. Now, yeah, let us check if the devices are reachable using ping. It's not IPnP ping, but it's an Ansible module ping. We should get an output as follows. So you simply say Ansible routers minus M ping. We got this message as expected, right? Failed to connect to a host via SSH. So Ansible's default mode of connecting to devices is via SSH. Right? That we have to keep in mind. Ansible by default, in the absence of any other additional information, Ansible tries to connect to the device via which device? The list of devices which are mentioned in the inventory, or the ones which we have mentioned in the command line. Now, what is the list of hosts which are mentioned in the inventory, and what I am mentioning here is, it's like, yeah, in my inventory there are 100 devices, 200 devices, 300 devices, but do I want to ping all of them at this point of time? No, I want to ping only selective hosts. So that I am specifying here separately. Suppose I want to ping all, I'll say all. Suppose I want to ping a specific group, I'll say the name of that group. Suppose I want to ping or apply this command on a specific host, I'll mention its name. Okay, so that is the way Ansible commands are executed, either on all or on specific devices. So in that command, what we have done is we have asked Ansible to ping to the devices. So by default, what it does, it tries to use SSH to connect to those devices and perform ping. And this ping is not a ICMP ping, it is a Python module, which means on the target node, it tries to go and when I say Python module, there is a Python file with the name ping. It tries to go and connect to the device and tries to execute this Python command, Python file called as ping. And obviously in this case, the devices we are connecting to are network devices. Python is not installed on them. So the command is going to fail. Right? Right? Even before that, yeah, we have not provided any other details. Like we have not told Ansible how to connect to SSH, whether it is using keys or user or password. And we have not told if user or password, we have not given any user or password. If it is keys, we have not set up any keys. So it doesn't understand how to do. So it said, I'm not able to connect to network devices using this. Yeah. Even if you provide username and password, it fails because this is not a ICMP ping, it is a Python module. So even if you provide details, it will try to go and execute the Python code on the router and it is going to fail. So what we do is when we are connecting to network devices, we have to select the connection mode by giving this -C flag. When we are connecting to network devices, for giving this command, we have to specify the type of connection as network CLI. Right? This is a kind of mode, connection mode provided by Ansible to deal with network devices. Because all the network devices have their own CLI where we issue commands and interact, right? So they have created this network CLI as a connection type to deal with network devices. So whenever we are trying to connect to network devices to issue any command, we should say -C network CLI. In my case, I did local, which means whatever Python code that you want to execute on the machine where I gave the command, and then go and perform the action, what is said in this on the device. Right? So -C local also works, but that is being deprecated, which means it will no longer be supported. Right? It will start giving error when we use that. So proper way of specifying which connection to use is using -C. Network CLI is the connection mode to be used for network devices. So I'll rerun the command again. Ansible, which host to ping? R1. What is the module? -M. Ping is the module. What connection mechanism to be? If I leave as it is, it will try to use SSH. So I'll have to say -C network _ CLI. Now it is saying, so this is the main response. If you this program ping will send a request as ping, the server responds with pong. I mean, that's the way these guys have written it. If the handshake between client and the control node and the managed node is successful, they have written Python logic to return a string called as pong. That's all. And you see, since the Python is being used and it is getting executed, it has shown, which Python interpreter it is using. So it is using local Python interpreter to execute this code because the network device cannot execute this Python code, what is mentioned in this ping.py. Okay, so what we have done is we have established a way to ping our network device. So we are going slowly, step by step. First we made a list of all network devices. Then we grouped them. Okay, these could be these are routers, these are switches, these are firewalls, these are something else. Right? And then what we have done, we have defined in the form of variables, we have defined what are their IP addresses, what are their network OS types. Right? And then what we have done, we have finally found out how I can check whether a specific device is up or down. Suppose I give R2 here. And R2 -M. Okay. That is the problem for this one. R2 is not up. Then why is it showing? Okay. I think the way it is working is it's just detected that yes, it is mentioned in my inventory and it is using the local connection. So it looks like it is not going to the device after all. So it is not much of use. Why this? Okay, I'll just check that why this is happening. But for S1 it is failing because we have not specified the network OS for this thing. So it doesn't know whether it is a network device, whether it is not a network device, whether to use. We are saying use network CLI to connect to S1, but we have not mentioned it's network OS. So that's what it is complaining. If I do this switches also. Okay, I think it is just executing locally and then returning PON if it just detects the host being present in host file. Yeah, that's what is happening. Yeah, I'll get back to you on this. Is there a better way to do this? Whether the real device is really up or we are able to ping it. And this will be done anyway. It's executing. Okay, yeah, I got it. For network devices, ping is not really effective. I mean, non-Python devices. Sorry about that, background noise. Non-Python devices, ping will not really make sense, right? But for devices where Python is installed, it tries to go and execute this on the device. Right? So there it is useful. Only if the device is up, the Python code will execute there and will get this response. Otherwise, it will throw an error. Okay, now we are all set to start giving commands to our devices, be it network or be it Linux servers. Any questions so far? I just realized that probably it went for long. So as I said, like I've not found a solution yet. This seems to be a limitation either on the WSL side or the VMware side, VMware workstation side. Okay. Yeah. So there's a shortcut. So without going into your this thing, right? You open your PowerShell in admin mode. A shortcut as in not a very shortcut, but yes, it's a shortcut. So now I will, sorry. Excuse me. Yeah, so this is my admin mode. This is my PowerShell in admin mode. So I'll have to do bcd edit. This is a command. Set hypervisor launch type. This is a single word. Hypervisor launch type. Now, if you want to turn it off, you have to say off. If you want to turn it on, you have to say auto. Right? Now, let's say your WSL is working and EVNG will not work. So you have to turn off your hypervisor. So you'll say bcd edit /set hypervisor launch type off. Yeah, if you need WSL and you're not planning to use your VMs, EVNG, then you can, you come back here and do auto. But this change will take effect only after you reboot. So after this command, you have to reboot your system. Which one? Yeah, why not? Your Windows system also will have Python installed, right? So you can write Python code on your Windows system and execute it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can add me on. Yeah. You can ping me. Okay. Sure.